taking a breather to refocus our thoughts and refill our cups. And now, Lower Dorks, a Star Trek Lower Decks podcast, once again dives deep down into the ships of Season 3. So tell us, why does my cup look different than before?
Great observation there. We are drinking, this time, for part 2, a Dark and Stormy. In case you didn't know, that is rum with ginger beer and a bit of lime. And hey, Thomas Marrone, you're with us again to talk yet more ships, and you selected this beverage. Why'd you pick this one?
Yeah, I picked this one because I had rum in my apartment, and so I got it after our last show. I got excited about the old fashions that we made, and especially with the blue curacao, and I was like, I should take that over to my girlfriend's place. So I did, but then I left it there in her fridge, and I didn't have that stuff anymore. So I was like, okay, well, let's see. Oh, I've got rum. What's a good rum drink? And then I saw the ginger beer rum thing, and I thought, hey, that looks good. And then when I made mine, the instructions I found was like 6 parts rum to 1 part ginger beer, which sounds insane. Yeah, I did not do that. I did about half and a half.
Yeah.
And even then, I feel like it's a little too strong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got my extra ginger beer up with me, so as I drink it, I'm just adding more ginger beer in.
That's probably solid. Mine is about 1/3 rum and about 2/3 ginger beer. But it's like, I like the ginger beer effect. I don't think we've had a Dark and Stormy in a while, Aaron. But
oh yeah, we've done it before. But
yeah,
you can't go wrong with ginger and lime. It's a delicious combo, and I think in whatever measurements float your boat, don't listen to what the internet tells you. Do what you want. Yeah, let your heart be your guide, or your taste buds. One of those two.
Yeah, why not both? Well, let's pick up talking about the ships of Lower Decks Season 3. And you know what? We have to start off with a banger. And you know what? It's not even a ship, but you know what? I don't care. It's a tacky fascist Cardassian eyesore.
Damn it! Deep Space Nine. This isn't a ship. God, why are you so bad at this? Next thing
I know.
Oh, here's some stalactites. And it's like, come on, man, ships. Those are rocks.
I had one job, right? Yeah, I know. But this is from the episode Here All Trust Nothing. And we got to talk about this, man, because we have not seen Deep Space Nine for some time. And here it is, lovingly recreated. It seems pretty accurate to me. I don't know, Thomas, what do you think? You have the keen eye here. What do you think of the exterior?
No, it looks great. I mean, I think it's it's a clearly, I don't remember how deeply we went into this on our last show, but they're transitioning more and more to 3D models.
Yeah.
Right.
You can tell that as opposed to doing sort of keyframe animation. And sometimes I think when you do those plates, you don't actually animate anything. You sort of have the background moving, and you've got the still painting or whatever of the ship. But I think I don't think it's insider information to say that one of the connections that the show built was with the Paramount Archive that has access to all the models that Eagle Moss, rest in peace, they built for their collection. So every model that Eagle Moss made had to start as a computer model, right? Like as a CG model, even if the original ship was not made in computer graphics. They had to create a digital file for their, prototyping, printing process. So, it's possible that this DS9 model was actually, like some of the other ships we've seen, I'm pretty sure were Eagle Moss models that the production got their hands on. But it looks good. It's a cool station. Did we go into the story about the design of Deep Space Nine last time? I can't remember.
We had just gotten.
I don't think so.
Gotten here.
Oh, okay.
We just started
talking about DS9.
Okay.
Not at all.
I was looking forward to.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, well, so the thing that I feel like it would have been fun for them to go even more deeply into is that DS9 is actually like an oil rig, right? Yeah. Like Terrac Noir is analogous to like a modern day oil rig. Yeah, it's they pull up raw material and they refine it. And so a lot of the early concept art for DS9 was designed like an oil rig.
It's really just interesting designs because it's very blocky and chunky. I'm actually glad they didn't go with it. I love the final design of DS9, but yeah, those original pieces of concept art were just really fascinating. I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't show up anywhere else in Star Trek.
Yeah, I mean they look like an oil rig in space with like a ton of lots of pipes and very super industrial. They were
Right.
leaning hard into the background. And Rick Berman, whatever you think of him, he was right in this instance where he was looking at all these drawings and he said, "This needs to be something a child can draw." And that is it sounds silly, but that is the most important thing about making a hero ship, a flagship for a series, is it has to be something that's easy to remember and easy to recreate.
Mm.
And because that's the thing that it's like the Nike swoosh, the McDonald's arches. A good starship design is actually like logo design. It's designing something that has a very distinct silhouette and personality. And so that's why they transitioned from the super complex oil rig to it's a circle with 3 spokes, and they decided the number 3 was going to be the Cardassian motif and everything. But
Right.
I wanted to bring that up because when we're talking about starships, like that principle is one of the most important things. If you want to go on and design your own ships, you have to think about like, it looks cool, but is it memorable, and is it something that's easy for somebody else to like sketch on a napkin or on paper or whatever? And so that story always stuck with me.
Yeah, that's actually one of the problems I noticed from Star Trek as it went on. Is they ran into a point where very often you were seeing ships that were like silhouette wise, right? Basic shape, basic layout. They weren't getting very creative or adventurous. And if you were just to take that silhouette, you would wind up with very samey looking ships. They're the same basic shape, but different in details. And there's nothing that wrong with that for the, ship of the week. But I even feel like they started running into that problem with some of the later starship designs. Like, you had Prometheus and Voyager in the same series. And you kind of get what they were trying to do with that. But at the same time, I just felt like those ships felt very samey.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly DS9. I mean, talk about recognizable. I mean, they milk it for all it's worth in the Lower Decks episode. Where they just have the ship show up and circle the pylons and all that. So, what did you guys think of the interior? I mean, the interior was also very faithfully recreated, but it's got some improvements too. There's the Batless RS, I think, and the gift shop in Quarks. Was that a little too different from the canon you know and love, or was that welcome additions?
Didn't bother me at all.
No.
Lower Decks does a really good job of inserting bits that are very tongue-in-cheek while at the same time just kind of fitting with the galaxy that they're in. Inevitably, Deep Space Nine post-Dominion War is going to be a tourist trap. It's just such a huge part of history, right? The promenade is probably just filled with touristy shops and destinations.
It's funny, just so you guys talking about how it started off as a oil rig design. Now that I think about it, I'm kind of like, it's just kind of like an apartment complex with some shops on it. It's kind of like a mall and an apartment complex with the command center.
That was always the problem I had with Deep Space Nine, though, was like, I think...
You didn't like that?
No.
You don't want more apartment complexes in space?
No. I like that. I like the design of it. I like the fact that there are shops, because it was a place where people lived and worked, even if they were, laborers, slaves, or otherwise, depending on how you sell it. But my problem is there was just never enough interior space. I guess if the thing is surrounded in some sort of shielding, so solar radiation and that stuff isn't getting to the interior, you could reality just have your ore floating in space. But I felt like there was just never enough interior space for that function.
Interesting to think about. I mean, there's not a lot for the, it's clearly been built so that the, it's got the spokes on the wheels, like you said, Thomas, and it gives the impression that it's bigger than it is. Kind of a interesting optical illusion about DS9 for sure.
But I think it was cool. It's great to see. It was great to see. It was great to hear the music.
Yes, the music for sure.
Iconic place, and they clearly excited to be there.
And you knew they were going to do it eventually, and I'm just glad that it came off so well.
Oh, yeah. For sure. Well, let's move on to the other ship that
actually
shows up in Here I'll Trust Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I know, yeah, right.
Congratulations, Stravos.
It's hard to believe.
50% success rate with this episode.
I'm making it work. It's the Karemma ship that shows up for the peace negotiations. And we've seen the Karemma ship show up once before, and that was in DS9's episode Starship Down. We actually get a better look at it in this episode of Lower Decks than we do in DS9. I did a little bit of research. You don't really get like see the whole ship view in DS9 that much. So it was really kind of neat. I mean, I don't know if there's anything super remarkable about the design. It looks good, but it's not, it doesn't crazy grab your eye. It's there. It's a thing. It looks decent for what it is. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I've always been a fan of designs that are a bit more utilitarian. I'm a fan of designs that remind you that logistics and are still a thing in the 24th century, and Karemma are traders and merchants, but as described, for the Gavin Quadrant. So although it's Planet of Hats, it's kind of silly that like the Karemma, they're all merchants, and the Ferengi are all merchants, and the Klingons are all warriors. It's like
100%.
All right, I get why that happens in sci-fi, but it's also.
I would assume that the Karemma are a lot like the Ferengi. Like, if they were given a prominent role in a series, they would get fleshed out so that, it's just like the Ferengi.
Sure.
Yeah, they're all just traders. And then, like, when you actually see them, it's like, oh no, they actually have a robust society that's just way, way too devoted to, capitalism and economic Darwinism.
Right. I mean, we think about that, like, however people perceive Americans. Like there's certainly more to it than that, but there's also those reputations come from somewhere. So I think what makes it a little weird with Star Trek is people are conflating culture with genetics, right? Because it's like Ferengi as a race are profit driven, right? That feels icky. Sure. Vulcans as a race are super smart and strong. Like so anyway, we don't. That's a whole rabbit hole. We don't want to go down.
Another can of worms. For sure. We're supposed to be talking about ships.
It's a solid design. I like it. Like you said,
it's got nacelles.
Blocky. Yeah. It's very industrial, purpose-driven. The other thing I like about it is it follows the rules for Starship design, except for obviously that it kind of lacks buzzard collectors, if I recall. And I'm always disappointed when they don't incorporate deflectors at all in ship design, and nobody else really does that except the Federation. And I just wish more ships would do it. And I feel like this ship is perfectly designed to have a deflector shield in its nose, or deflector dish rather. But other than that, I really like it. I feel like they made it its color just to fit in with everything else in this series is colored brown. I feel like just way too many things were brown in DS9.
That was a very brown show, wasn't it? Well, let's move on to the next ship. We talk about boxy, and this next ship is actually quite boxy as well. This is from the episode Mathematically Perfect Redemption, and we were talking about the Drookmani shuttle. We've seen the Drookmani ships in other episodes, but never the shuttle. It's very much a plot device in this episode because it's got to pop out, and the guys have got to make their escape in it and whatever that happens in the episode. But, talk about the Drookmani ships. The capital ships are very boxy, rectangular, cargo shippy look to them. And the shuttle is just like this cute little boxy shuttle, and like the little nacelles pop out of it. I think it's cute and industrial looking.
And I love the way it just pops out of the ship itself. It's like the Areore shuttle on Voyager that you never get to see.
Right. Right. It definitely looks like that. It kind of pops out of the hole there. I was going to complain about how it has warp engines on it, but you know what, Thomas? I was reminded of our conversation in part 1 about the nacelles generating something subspace fields, and I was like, you know what? It's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's got a kind of homeworld aesthetic to it a little bit too, and that's that's my vibe. So.
Yeah, definitely love the boxiness of it. But what's the problem with the warp nacelles? How do you know that it can't go to warp? Yeah,
that's right. I don't know that either.
Assumptions there, Stavros.
I was upset about the Sambagita from our earlier discussion, but I'm over it now. You know what? Little ships can have warp nacelles.
Yeah,
and I'm not
Stavros. The
excited
shuttle
about
can
it.
have warp nacelles if it wants to. Don't tell that shuttle
right.
how to
Oh, there are
live.
plenty. I mean, the very first the very first shuttle had warp nacelles. The Galileo had
Oh, yeah.
nacelles, but I mean, they say it has nacelles, but it doesn't actually have warp engines. So I'm not
Yeah,
really
they call
sure.
it something else in original series,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
they're like
I can't remember what
thruster
they call it.
pods or something, but
Yeah.
they look like warp engines. So
Yeah.
I think, it's possible that they were like subspace sustainers or something. Like when
Right.
you fire a torpedo at warp, it has the ability to kind of perpetuate the subspace field around it after it's launched from the ship to keep it going at warp, even though it doesn't have a warp engine of its own. And so maybe that's what the nacelles on the Galileo were. But anyway,
It could
cool
be.
shuttle.
I want to see a little torpedo with a little warp
my
nacelle
God.
attached to it, just to perpetuate this.
So maybe it doesn't even need a nacelle. If you're building torpedoes, why not just do like warp rings, right? Worked for the Vulcans.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
that's right.
Yeah,
They're
the
a thing.
warp rings are really cool.
I'm sad that we
I'm a
never
big
saw
fan.
more designs of that like style. I know they weren't really introduced till Enterprise,
Mhm.
but it would have been nice if they had built some lore around why they're not used, and then show that some races do actually use them. I don't know. I liked it, and I wish they would have continued that trend.
For sure. Well, let's talk about the other ship that appears, or ships, I think, multiple ships that appear in Mathematically Perfect Redemption. And those are the Areore ships, the ancient bird people ships that have been lying dormant on the planet for some time. I love that they have the bird-like wings on them because they belong to bird
Is
people.
that why
that seemed to make
they're
sense.
shaped like that? I
mean,
assumed that they were huge Batman fans.
They're bird people that are fans of bats. What's going on? This is making
No.
sense. But no, these ships, I thought they're neat
Yeah.
because they're distinct. A child could draw them, as we said before. The weapons, in fact, I thought were very distinctive. I tried really hard to get a decent still of them, but it looks better in animation. They're kind of this like cluster beam firing something, but it looks really cool regardless. It really beats up the Cerritos too. What do you guys think of them?
I liked them. I it's always interesting seeing new alien ships, and it's cool. We talked about silhouette a minute ago, and I think they had a unique silhouette that kind of makes a statement about the ship and the race, and the fact they're technologically advanced. But that whole episode is just like batshit insane. But
Yeah.
it also reminds me of the bird people from Zelda.
Yeah. A bit.
And so I was sort of thinking about Zelda the whole time I was watching the
episode. I can totally see that.
But I had a lot of fun with that episode. I really enjoyed it, and it had some great twists and turns, and the ships were pretty cool. It reminds me of they're essentially like the good guy version of like the Valdore in a way.
Oh, in a once advanced civilization that like disappeared.
Yeah, well, and they had, and all their ships were buried, and the Valdore had all of their ships were beneath the were just sort of waiting for them to wake up. I think the Valdore is a better example than like the is it Batu from not Batu?
Oh my
Baku?
God, that's Star Wars.
Yeah, Batu is Star Wars. Baku from Insurrection.
Baku, yes.
Yeah.
Did they have ships in that movie? I cannot.
No,
remember.
the Baku never had ships, and that's why I think the Valdore are a better example.
Yeah, right.
The one thing about this ship that I found interesting, aside from the fact that it's been, buried for however long and it starts up without any problems, like, leave your car sitting in a field for 20 years and go and try and start it and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like a backwards Decora, right? Yeah, the Ferengi ship.
Yeah, a little bit.
Same basic silhouette. I mean, details obviously different, but I always kind of wondered about the Decora because was like the wing parts, is that supposed to be where the warp engines are? Not that I'm saying this thing is warp capable. I don't think it is.
I think so.
But
no obvious warp engines. But yeah, the Decora had the little glowy bits on.
It's supposed to be advanced. Maybe it uses like the Borg style, transwarp warp engines, whatever they're using. That doesn't require the nacelles.
Yeah, all we really
the
see is
gun.
the guns, and that's pretty much it.
Well, I mean, there
You
are
have to
lots
kind of
of
go off the looks.
yeah, there are lots of ships
Yeah,
in Star
and
Trek.
so
that don't have
I
these
kind of
guns,
like that.
though.
I like the idea that
That's
there's
true.
multiple ways to get across space. I like universes that have that angle.
What do you
Yeah,
guys
they're-
suppose? So I took a still of this ship where you can see the underside, and there's this big glowy triangular bit.
Mhm.
What do you think that is?
Oh, the
Is that the
impulse
deflector?
engine.
Oh, the engine? Yeah, it could be.
Well, it's going. I mean, the prongs are the front, right? So it's
Yes.
probably the impulse engine would be my guess.
Maybe some sort of like radiator component or something.
Radiators.
We're going back
What
to
a
the
what a
radiators.
concept.
I was thinking about that after our last talk, though, and it's all like, I think there's a point where like you can convert between matter and energy that like heat management just stops being an issue.
Yeah, I mean they pump raw plasma through their starship in a bunch of different pipes. Like
Right.
they gotta have it figured out somehow. I mean,
I love like some
really good
primitive
insulation.
race gets
Yeah.
aboard the Enterprise and they're showing them the technology and they're like, "Why is your ship not melting right now?"
right? I bet there's something about that in the TNG Tech Manual. That book is there's a lot more in there than you think there is.
There's
Like,
so
if-
much. I need to dig out my copy. Why is that not online, by the way? I've thought about that before. Why is there no online equivalent? Seems
Yeah, I
crazy.
mean you can buy a PDF of it. Like you can buy a Kindle version of it.
Oh, okay.
But it's actually really thorough and explains what I think is really cool about it. And I wish that it had that more writers kind of referred to it more strictly. Is it not only explains the miracle technologies of Star Trek, but also explains their limitations in a way that a lot of writers I think kind of forget about. It's like replicators aren't magic. Like it explains like here's how they work and here's why you can't just replicate anything and everything.
The only limitations I need to know about are the limitations of plot.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Said the writer for every show after this technical manual was published. There's been a lot of this. Quick Google shows this was published in '91, so there's been a lot of Star Trek since then.
Yeah, it's still in
How
print.
much that years? It's still in print, Wow, really?
Yeah.
Star Trek fans
I gotta have my copyright
love their.
It's a classic, but it's also. But I mean, it is. I think one of the best examples of a fictional tech manual ever made. Like it's
because it's true.
It's really well done.
Time from the future.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like that. I've been working on my own book project, and I've been referring to that a lot. So,
are you doing the paper? Are you referring to paper version or to Kindle version?
I have like 3 copies of it in paper. One of them actually signed by Mike Okuda, and he said his signature said, "Study hard. They will be a test later." Which,
I love it.
It was great.
Amazing.
All right, well, let's move on to the next ship. We're actually going to move on to Crisis Point 2. And if you recall at the beginning of that episode...
What a good episode, man. I love this episode.
I think Aaron's favorite episode,
We were talking we spent a significant amount of time talking about this episode on our Season 3 retrospective. This episode is definitely one of my top episodes for the series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is really good. But let's talk about the ship that shows up here. We get to see a Valdore, and it's a Valdore, but it's a Valdore variant because there's a pod on it. And you know what they say: if you need a variant, you just throw a pod on it.
Yeah, that's my philosophy.
Is it just a Valdore with a pod? I felt like
it looks like
details were different.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of details can we pick out here? There's some.
If only we had an expert here to opine on this.
Not just an expert, but an expert who recently supervised the development of this model for Star Trek Online.
Wow,
specific model. Unfortunately, we didn't get the show asset, so I should say I have not had a close look at it, but we studied a lot of the screenshots and stuff. And yes, there are some minor structural differences. There's some things that are lit that weren't lit in the original Nemesis model and vice versa. There's some little areas that are structurally a little different, but it is unequivocally like a Valdore type ship. Essentially a refit or another variant. And it has the giant shark fin on the back, which is super cool. So
Right.
in Star Trek Online, we wanted to do a legendary. Having this ship show up in Lower Decks was like great. This gives us an excuse to do a new version of the Valdore and STO, or excuse me, we call the class name. So the ship name in Nemesis is Valdore,
Right.
which is
Valdore
different from the
type,
class
right?
name. Yeah, Valdore type on Memory Alpha. Our class name that we use in the game is Mogai. So we wanted a new
Right.
version of the Mogai. We wanted an excuse to revamp the Mogai because our model was like 8 years old or almost 10 years old at this point. So yeah, so we were able to make a new version based on Lower Decks and sell that version, and that sort of underwrit the remastering of the original canon version as well. And it was nice because they were, they shared a lot of bits.
It's weird because we haven't seen the Valdore type or the Mogai in almost. I mean, it's been in Nemesis and it's been in this episode of Lower Decks, and I think that's it.
That's it.
Hasn't shown up anywhere else.
Canonically, those are the two.
And I talked about this briefly when we were talking about the Daredecks, and I don't like the Valdore. I prefer like the direction they were going with the Daredecks, and I wish they had like continued to evolve that basic shape. So I was kind of disappointed that they, and it's, I mean, the other problem is it's very similar to a bird of prey, which, makes sense because the original idea of the bird of prey was that it was a stolen Romulan vessel, but that canon got abandoned, and so now it doesn't make as much sense, and I don't know.
I think you're off the show is what I think. I think you're completely wrong. I love this shit. I can see where you're going with it being the silhouette being similar from the top view, being similar to a Klingon bird of prey, but it's just so cool, man. I don't know. I wish there was more of it. I was actually disappointed. If you recall, there's that episode where Rutherford keeps blacking out and he goes on this Black Ops mission to Romulan space with Shax.
Yep.
And the ships are scanning, and it's all the Daredecks. I'm like, why aren't there Valdores?
I know it's a fan favorite. So
and it's also one of those things that's interesting because the nature of the episode of Crisis Point 2 makes it suspect that it's actually canon.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's like Vindicta's ship in Crisis Point 1 is probably not actually a starship in the real universe. It's like a D7 with a giant gun on top. And it's sort of like, well, this just sort of Boimler's like, I think sharks are cool, so I'm going to make the Valdore look like a shark, right? Or is this an actual variant? And so for STO, we just sort of chose to believe that this is a real variant. But it's sort of like open to question whether or not this is a real version of the ship that the Romulan Star Empire used, or it's just like, from
Boimler made it up.
Imagination.
It's funny because did you get the sense this is a 3D model?
I think so.
Yeah. I think
it's funny because it's just in frame, and for such a small amount of time, you barely get a glimpse of it. It was exceedingly hard to get a screen capture of it that shows the little pod on there. So it's crazy they built this whole model. It's on screen for.
Well, I think it was probably started as an Eaglemoss asset that they converted and then kitbashed to add the fin to it. Got it. I think the Sovereign that we're going to talk about next is kind of the same.
I do wonder though if like some of these one-off ships that are popping up that are like canon race ships, if they're not building just like an asset library for future use, or
could be.
So if they ever run into that point where they're like, we're low on money, they can just be like, okay, let's just use these things we've already made and slap them together for an episode without having to do a bottle episode.
That would certainly be, a good thing to do. And it's something, that Star Trek, like, every time I talk to somebody at Paramount, I'm like, hey guys, if you, that's literally what happened with Picard seasons 2 and 3, where it was like, we need more Starfleet ships. We don't have time or money to make them. Who has Starfleet ships? Oh, Star Trek Online has a ton of them. And so they reached out to us and worked with us to, send them over. And, we're lucky that they were willing to do that. They were open to do that. And not just production designer Dave Blass, but also Brian Statoski, the VFX supervisor. They saw that, our models were good enough to show up in the background and stuff. And so I would certainly love if more shows took advantage of our stuff, as I think it would hold up fine on Lower Decks or Prodigy. But, I think it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah. Got to save that money when you can. Fastio's done it. Why make it yourself?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's actually move on and talk about the Sovereign. It actually shows up in 2 episodes in Crisis Point, which we're talking about right now, and then later in The Stars at Night. We've got the USS Wayfarer under Boimler's holographic command, and the USS Mansitters. I thought this ship looked freaking great. I thought the Sovereign looked great in the films where it shows up, but man, does it look good in the show. I don't know what it is, if it's the lighting or...
In my opinion, it's the toned down Aztecing, but it also almost has like a chrome sheen to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that what it is? It might be.
Boimler wanted to use the platinum shield from Star Trek Online. It feels like that, right? It feels like
totally. Yeah.
I want the Sovereign, but like 20% more badass. Because I feel like when the Van Sitter shows up, it's just a normal.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, it's pretty, but it's just it's using the canonical like high contrast color scheme, and the Wayfarer is very
very shiny and chrome.
Yeah, it looks cool. It's cool, but yeah, it definitely feels embellished for the sake of the drama.
Yeah. Hey man, that Captain Bucephalus Dagger certainly knows how to paint a ship.
Mm-hmm.
Do the captains get to decide how to paint their ship?
No,
I believe it because Picard strikes me as a man who would paint his ship eggshell blue.
Right.
God.
Let me see. I mean, like in Star Trek Online, they do.
Well, sure, that's true.
But certainly, I don't know. I can't imagine in the real Navy that captains get to paint their ship.
Hey, in this show, in Lower Decks, Captain Freeman's like, I don't want upgrades. I want my old crappy ship back.
Sovereign looking.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see a Sovereign style Cerritos. Make it happen.
Maybe we'll see some kind of teched out California class at some point. Who knows? Anyway, I love the Sovereign. With both its appearances, it looks really great. Almost better than the films, I would say.
Definitely the shiny and chrome version definitely leapfrogged ahead of any of the movie versions for me.
Yeah, completely. Let's move on to another Crisis Point 2. This is also not a ship, Aaron.
Stavros! One job! You had one job!
Completely failing, I know. But it is the Temporal Research Lab, and it looks like
it is the office complex.
A chopped off head.
Bits on.
Of the regular type. Yeah. I think this one's got to be a 2D model. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
This has got to be not a model, a 2D drawing.
You can very much tell that it's some type of painting, most likely just like a paint over, because I feel like I've seen this exact scene in DS9.
Oh, really?
I want to say.
I did not recognize it, so it's possible. But I obviously needed a place to set the Wrath of Khan interior, rip off. So I don't know. It's fine. It just looks a lot like the regular type station top, which is fine. That's all they need.
Which funnily enough, started life upside down, they took the model from the motion picture as the office complex and flipped it over to make regular one. But yeah, I don't really have anything to add to. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, one thing I think is kind of cool is that they were like, okay, we need this station that's on an asteroid or a moon or whatever. And instead of just drawing some random buildings, they went back and said, oh, what can we use from Star Trek that fits the bill? And people are going to be like, oh, look. And I totally believe that those stations last for, 100 years or whatever, because that buildings in the real world last that long, like they're,
why not? Yeah.
Infrastructure in the real world is maintained and upgraded.
Our buildings don't have shields and structural integrity fields and aren't made out of super materials from the future.
One thing that caught my eye about this, there's some kind of docking doors there, maybe some kind of exterior doors, but they got little windows on them, and that's not really something you see in a lot of Star Trek.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
How'd you guys feel about that? Is that a little weird
think it's
detail
just a
there?
Design error, like whoever was putting it together was doing it fast, and those windows, they look to me like they're just like an overlay layer.
Yeah, you might also have things where like several artists are working on the same, same comp or something, and so like the person who did the windows isn't the person who picked the ship or.
Right.
Also worth noting, the reference for this would have had the door open. I don't think you ever see this model with the door closed.
Sure.
So
Crazy.
pretty sure it doesn't look like that if it's closed. So the uses of this model that I can think of off the top of my head are motion picture, obviously, Wrath of Khan, and then it's used in TNG and DS9. It's used in TNG in Measure of a Man, and then used in DS9 for Starbase 327 or whatever. But I feel like in all of those cases, that hangar bay
you're right, because it always has the weird X design, right?
Yeah.
Right, some kind of lit up X in there. Yeah. So I mean, who knows what that is? I mean, is it a dock? I mean, maybe there are windows in the doors and you use it for something else.
All right, hold on. Starbase 357. I have to correct myself for one of your listeners.
Wow. Makes lots of
comments.
Yeah.
So clearly, you don't listen to the show because in my drunken ramblings, I get stuff wrong all the time. And when I sober up,
and no one cares.
Oh no, the fans are going to hate this, and nobody says anything.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want on this show. That's
the Windows being on there though actually now makes me feel like that makes more sense. That this is probably some standard model framework that they just build out in space wherever they need a station, and that area is normally like a docking port or a repair bay for ships. But they're like, oh yeah, we're not going to need that. So they slapped some, standard issue doors on it and then cut holes in it for windows.
Yeah,
that's my headcanon.
They put like the bedroom in the garage.
That's how you can tell I'm a true Star Trek fan. I'm going through mental gymnastics to explain a tiny little graphic glitch.
It's the station equivalent of delicious street corn. Okay, that's how you make it work.
Oh man, we got more ships.
Anyway, I think that's enough about this.
Ship here.
Yeah,
come on.
Let's talk about more ships.
Boy.
I got a real ship for you next. It's the another Crisis Point ship. It's the Cult's freighter. And at first, there's a little story behind this. When I was putting this notes together, I was like, "What the hell is this? This is just a random, nonsense freighter." And then Aaron picks it out successfully as the Batriss redress. And in case you didn't know, listener-wise, the Batriss was the ship that the Klingons took a hold of in TNG's Heart of Glory. It's supposed to be a Tellurian freighter. And, looking at how that ship appears in Memory Alpha, it's gotta be the same silhouette. They clearly took that design from that episode.
Yeah, and I think this is absolutely it's definitely a 3D model. I think it's absolutely another Eaglemoss model that they incorporated in the production because it's actually way more detailed than a lot of the Lower Decks original ships are. Like you look at all the piping and all that stuff, and I think stylistically, I think they were just like, oh, this is cool. They I'm sure they went through all the Eaglemoss models they had, and they're like, oh, we need a generic freighter. Here's a good example, and this freighter model was used quite a bit.
Is an understatement. Like, I feel like whenever they needed, we need a freighter, they're like, okay, let's pull out the Batriss and rip some parts off and glue some other things on. It's been like upside right, upside down. It's had nacelles added and removed. It's just is there even a series where it doesn't show up? Because I know it was in all of the TNG era series. Did it make it into Enterprise?
Yeah.
Yep.
Enterprise, yep. Voyager, yep. Prodigy, yep.
It was in Prodigy? Really?
Apparently. Yeah, that's what it says.
What?
Crossroads. Yeah, it says Okona's ship.
Oh, wow.
I have to look into this. It's exastrascientia.org.
Oh, because it was Okona's ship in TNG too.
Yeah.
Oh,
yep, that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Class 9 cargo freighter vessel erstwhile TNG the Outrageous Okona. So of course they would use it. So I guess it wasn't in Discovery or
and another reason to hate Discovery. Just
right.
Strange New Worlds.
That's brutal. Jesus, because the Batriss didn't show up.
That now
that's your bar. That's your barometer.
In Discovery is no Batriss.
All right. Hashtag Batriss boys.
Batriss boys
on Twitter.
Yeah, make it a thing
with a Z.
Boys. Oh, okay. Of course.
So I think we kind of sidetracked here. I mean, I really do like this ship, right? The overall basic shape and design.
Yeah, it looks good. They actually get their money's worth. Yeah, there are multiple
Yeah.
exterior shots of this ship, way more than the Temporal Research Station, or I don't know, almost. Yeah,
The only
there's a lot
problem
of
is I don't
this
see
ship,
like
even in this
clear
episode.
warp nacelles.
Yeah, what are the nacelles here? They got the 3 in the back, and then the bigger glowy
Yeah.
bits on the bottom, which
No,
they got to do
I don't really
different
care.
things.
I like the design.
Who knows?
I like the idea that it strikes me as something that was built and then used for like 100 years, and like that 100 years is like going from TOS to TNG, or like Enterprise to TOS, where technology just kept leaping up, so they kept adding stuff onto it to keep up. That's really the feel I get from it.
I wanted to point out that the cargo pods are reminiscent of the DY-100 from Space Seed too, like the way they sort of like hang off, and their shape and everything.
Yeah,
and I wonder if that was kind of a little nod. I wonder who. I would bet money. I could be wrong, but I mean, this was designed early enough in TNG that there's a possibility that Andy Probert actually designed this. And if he did, then I'm sure that DY-100 reference was intentional, because he was a big fan of like honoring whatever sort of technological precedent early Star Trek had set. And he claims to have received the rules of starship design from Gene Roddenberry, which he is related, but I've never seen anybody quote Gene Roddenberry directly with those rules, so I don't know if that was just sort of
Gene Roddenberry, so like it's possible it's just something he said at a random time, because that's like the thing when like you like start like listening to people talking about Gene Roddenberry. He always said just like contradictory things all the time, right? Even about like just his development of Star Trek itself and the lore there was just all over the place. I think I get the feeling that Roddenberry was just had a very grandiose style in how he presented things. So rather than just being, hey, here's a random idea, it's all like, this is the genius vision,
He's got to have a talking man,
I do recommend. There's an amazing interview with Gene Roddenberry on YouTube. I need to look up the actual guy, but it's from the 70s, before the motion picture happens. So what's cool about it is like it's before Gene Roddenberry has a legacy. It's just sort of like at this point in his life, Star Trek was just a TV show that he did. So it's really cool to hear him talk about Star Trek as essentially a job, and then he's very like conscious about somebody asked, the guy asked him a question about Klingons, and he's like, oh, I didn't make up the Klingons, this other guy did, like he's not trying to like assume the godhood of Star Trek yet. And that's Scott Arthur, so is the name of that. So I recommend people go look up that interview. It's really interesting. I just want to wrap up the Batriss because I did look it up. So it actually wasn't designed at all. It was a kit bash of a model from V, the miniseries V.
What?
Built by model maker Greg Jean. And it
got remade like 4 times.
Yeah.
Wow. Is the Batriss redress in each one of those? I feel like it is with the amount of
it's not even like one ship, it's like several ships glued together.
Yeah, we took parts we had left over from V, and Captain EO, and the Space Knights.
And Earthstar Voyager. What a weird coincidence. I was just watching Earthstar Voyager this morning. Talk about crazy random happenstance. By the way, highly recommend that movie if you get a chance.
Batriss Boys. All right, you guys need a Batriss Boys t-shirt.
Oh my god.
We're going to make it work. Yeah. Get enough retweets, we'll make a shirt. We'll sell it. We'll retire off that money. Let's I feel like we've had enough of the Batriss. Let's move on to the final ship that appears in Crisis Point 2. It is an unnamed Defiant-class that Boimler, the Duplo Boimler, wakes up on, and it's implied to be a Section 31 ship. But Thomas we get only Boimler. only a single exterior shot of it. It looks like a painting to me. Would you agree, Thomas?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's got a definite distinctive look to it. I'm already upset of ships that don't have their names on it.
Because Section 31 is so known for their name tag.
Section 31, everyone knows about it anyway. You might as well
I
put
love
the
that,
damn
that
name
they
on your
call it
ships,
out
guys.
in this episode. Wait, if we're a secret clandestine organization, why do we wear badges?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was great.
that
Well,
was
what's
good.
the deal with the weird angular nacelles going on here? Can we talk
Yeah,
about this?
yeah. What's going on? And the blue buzzer collectors too also gives it a unique look. I don't know. It's a little bit crazy. It feels like someone kind of like stretched it out. Like they kind of grabbed it and tugged, and they did a little stretch out, and then repainted the buzzer collectors, and now it's a Defiant-class. But what do you guys think?
This is another example of like, oh man, it would have been cool to work with them because we have, if they wanted a stealth bomber Defiant, we have in Star Trek Online we've got the Phantom, which is a
Yes. Very, very cool design.
Yes.
Intel escort that is clearly inspired by the Defiant, but is much sleeker and very like stealth fighter inspired. It would have been cool to use that for this. It would have been perfect. But I think they wanted something that looked a little meaner, and so that's why they tapered the engines the way they did, and they gave it the Section 31 paint job, which is canonical, right? I mean, that's how it
true.
looks in Discovery.
Yeah.
So I think there was precedent there, whether they were explicitly following the Discovery precedent or not, or if it was just like it's Section 31, they're Black Ops, they should have a stealth fighter Defiant. But in any case, it serves the story pretty well. I think we could have helped them out with a really cool thing that was a little more unique, but one thing I did want to bring up that this made me think of is Star Trek Away Team.
Oh yeah, they're on the Defiant-class in that ship, or that game.
And it's like a super covert Defiant-class too.
Right.
I'm trying to find a picture of it.
It's a variant of the Defiant, though. It's not a bog standard variant, if I recall correctly.
No, like I'll be honest, I never played the game myself because I wasn't super into like tactical XCOM games at the time, which it was an XCOM style game, right, with a Star Trek skin essentially.
Kind of, yeah. That style was very popular at the time, like you said.
It wasn't my game, but it was something I remember kind of following, and it's and I think there is room. I wish that in the 90s they weren't afraid to. Like, hey, let's take XCOM and put a Star Trek skin on it. And, like, as long as you find people who want to make a cool product and want to tell a good story or, like, care about tying the game mechanics together, let's make a shooter on Voyager. Like, Elite Force is an awesome game.
I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
It was very weird, but I also like that they... It was a good game. They did a lot of exploration of like what they could get away with, and they introduced a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, and like I thought it was inspired that they like were like, okay, how do we adapt all these like shooter genre tropes to Star Trek? And actually, they had great ideas. Like your giant inventory of weapons,
transporter buffer on you.
The transporter buffer. I always thought that could belong in STO, and it never made it. But
totally, that was super cool. And I just wish there were more modern things like that. Like, oh hey, let's do a new Star Trek skinned XCOM, or let's do. I mean, like we've got Resurgence coming out soon, which I'm really really hyped about. Which is I think a perfect marriage of like Star Trek plus Telltale developed veterans adventure style game, and I think there's a lot of room there. And Star Trek doesn't.
I'm glad they're getting back to that of like just a variety of Star Trek games. There was a long run there where the only type of Star Trek games that were getting made were Star Trek ship games, and I'm glad that that's kind of getting derailed.
Yeah.
By the way, I found the ship from Away Team. It's the USS Incursion. It looks like someone took a Defiant-class and just shoved the nacelles like right up into the middle.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to find more views of this. So I asked a while back if we could use designs from older Star Trek games in Star Trek Online, and the answer I got back was yes, as long as we made brand new art. So like we'd have to make a new model. We couldn't use the original model.
Yeah. Right.
But I mean, this would be a cool thing to include in STO somehow. I'll have to look into it some more.
Anyway, we're getting off track here. Let's get back to more ships.
Yeah, ships that
this
show
next
their name.
one, I know. I wish they did. This next one doesn't have a name, but you know what? It shows the basis from it's from trusted sources. It's Starbase 80's Shuttlepod. I think it's a Type 15, but Thomas, you can totally correct me if I'm wrong there. It's difficult to tell some of these guys apart, but I think it's a Type 15.
I'll have to look. I'm not fluent in Shuttlepod.
You're not fluent from shuttles.
You don't
There's so many of them.
You don't have your Shuttlepod spotting book on your gear. That's a Type 14 in that tree. You tell by the majestic hum.
Whatever the bog standard 2-person Shuttlepod in TNG was, that's definitely what this is.
Yeah.
Very, very well maintained piece of hardware there.
Yeah. I love they keep the motif going for Starbase 80 even through the Shuttlepod.
Terrible it is.
It's great. Some poor artist, well, luckily artist maybe depending on your point of view, got to take this model and dirty it up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Make it fit that aesthetic.
Cool. The Type 15 is right. That's right.
Yeah. Cool. It's crazy that you can tell, like, it's funny just how boxy the shuttle is. I mean, even in TNG, even in the early 90s, they're like, this was a mistake, and they made the Type 6, and which has a lot more curves to it.
Well, to be fair, they had shuttle designs that they wanted to do from the outset that were very, like, just majestic, but I think there was cost issues, which is why we got the more toned down shuttles.
Yeah, because... This was a lot. I mean, this is when you build a shuttle, you have to build a full size prop, right? And that's true. This is what they could afford to build as a full size prop.
That's fair.
And curves are expensive, and that's actually, I think somebody said that when they were, I think it was like Bob Justman was showing Doug Drexler, he was showing somebody a model of of the Enterprise D, and he was like, "There's not a straight line on it." And he meant that as bragging rights of how expensive it was going to be to build it.
I believe it.
So yeah, I think the Type 15 are just sort of like, this is what we can build a full size prop of. Yeah. Because I don't know if it's Type 7 maybe, the Probert. So Andy Probert designed a bespoke, a new shuttlecraft for TNG, and like Aaron said, it was like very curvy and
basically
and
a flying saucer with nacelles. It was a beautiful design, and like they didn't board it via the back. There was like a ramp that came down underneath the forward command room. I was always disappointed that we never saw that realized. It's
the Type 7.
Far and away was one of my favorite concepts, and very disappointed we never saw it.
There's a good painting of it, I think, in the Ships of the Line calendars.
Oh, is there really?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Boy.
The main thing I love about this shuttle is, I mean, aside from the fact that it's all grimed up, just the fact that it has the weird, cheaper lines to it just totally fits the Starbase 80 MO.
Oh, yeah.
Of just shitty, cheap.
They might have even had that conversation of what's the worst shuttle? And then they picked this one.
I love that. It definitely is ranks amongst my. It's so weird to see it in late TNG too, where I think there are episodes where Data and Geordi are flying the shuttle, and it's one of these bad boys, and it just doesn't fit with the lines just don't fit with the TNG aesthetic. It's weird. Yeah, it works great here to personify Starbase 80 a little bit more.
Yeah, it shows up pretty late in the series too, if I recall. There's never a moment.
Yeah, I know.
Where they're
they had the Type 6 guys.
Let's just strike this thing and pretend it never happened.
It doesn't Data crash in the shuttle. They're probably we're going to destroy this prop. Let's have it crash in an episode. Anyway, enough about the Type 15. Let's move on to later in the episode of Trusted Sources. When the Breen attack the Cerritos, we get a nice, good look of the Breen.
I actually think the paint job and the lighting in this is better than the original DS9 appearance.
Yeah,
I kind of agree. It's got the same. It's not chrome like the Wayfarer, but something about the lighting and I don't know. It just looks really good.
Yeah, and I always like the Breen ships.
They can use texture maps bigger than 512 by 512.
Yeah.
This does have my problem of the asymmetrical ship issue, and we'll talk about it more later. there's no reason to make it asymmetrical. It's just more engineering effort to make it go properly. But I mean, heck is magic, so whatever. I'm going to allow it. It looks pretty.
Yeah.
What do you think,
I think
Thomas?
it's
Any
cool.
reactions?
It was cool to see Breen stuff again. I think it's cool to have asymmetrical ships every once in a while. It makes them more alien.
Definitely.
And unexpected.
Yep. Like I said, love the Breen ships.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping we'd get like a variant or something. I mean, again, expensive to make a new Breen ship, but just seeing the Interceptor back and looking as pretty as it does. Looks really good.
Wait, are they
it's always a fine line to walk.
Are they actually interceptors? Is that what they were referred to as in DS9?
I think so.
I don't know if they had a canon name. Maybe that was used.
Memory Alpha calls them Breen Interceptors.
All right.
So
whatever Alpha is never wrong.
Never wrong.
I mean, they're I generally feel like they're pretty anal about what they include as canon, right?
That's true.
I just love the fact that like you'll be on Memory Alpha like the day after an episode aired, and they'll have a full article with references cited and links already in there, and you're like,
I love it.
You just as soon as the episode airs, are you guys up all night just rewatching, pulling everything out you can? I'm always amazed.
Hey, you got to get the bragging rights of being the one to update Memory Alpha sometimes.
That could be it.
This is how it works.
Oh, man.
Let's move on to the last ship that shows up in Trusted Sources, but also shows up in the Stars at Night, and that is our favorite antagonist ship, the Texas-class.
Yeah.
And it's evil because the lights that are blue turn red eventually. I think that's my favorite part about the ship.
When it goes bad.
Yeah, when it gets hijacked,
I want to talk about this ship, but like the first thing I want to talk about is the MSD. Have you guys checked this out?
Yeah, it's got a lot of interesting detail to it. I want to know what these like deck long dotted lines are, though. I'm not an MSD connoisseur, but I don't remember seeing a lot of these types of things. I assume this kind of ship doesn't need a lot of.
The labels are all inconveniently Morse code.
But I don't know. Is there precedent for these in MSDs?
I would assume that they're either turbo lifts or power conduits, probably the latter.
Or possibly even like, material or power storage units.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the fact though that like, and this is what I really love, it's all machinery, right? Because it's an automated ship. There's none of the usual like deck stuff, but there is actually human space in there, and you can see that with the people. But it's just empty rooms. They did a really good job. There's a lot of attention to detail in this that is just fantastic.
Yeah, what a hero, the guy that made this MSD and jammed it into an episode for like a 2-second shot.
Right.
You know what though? They know their fan base.
It looks great. Yeah, they're gonna freeze frame it. People like us are gonna freeze frame it. So. You can see some detail in there aside from the empty rooms. Like I think you can see a computer core or two. You can see the details on the warp nacelle. I think there's like maybe some vehicles toward the back. So there's interesting stuff in there.
When we brought in STO, I had the artists who built it, Tobias Richter, built our model for us, and he included a few escape pods with the idea that like. First of all, in STO, if you're flying the ship, you obviously have at least a small crew. You're on it, but but ultimately, even with automated things like this, you would want at least a few places where people could go for maintenance and and upkeep and all that stuff. So it makes sense to me.
And it's also it's on second contact missions, so there's a good possibility it would need to bring people aboard and transport them from point A to point B.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Given that it seems to be able to, replicate large scale items, I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in a, replicator, database there is, this is a 10 by 10 room, and we just replicate into it all the furniture that we need for a person to be comfortable.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense.
It was interesting. I was thinking about are there other examples of unmanned ships in Star Trek? And the ones that come to mind first are the Section 31 ships from Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And funny enough,
Starfleet never learns its lesson.
Apparently not.
One bad experience with genetic engineering 500 years ago, and we're still banning it in even the most necessary
Right.
situations. But bad experience after bad experience after bad experience with sentient starships, and we just keep trying again.
But the interesting things about those Section 31 ships is those actually do look like the Intel ships that are in STO.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly.
Yeah, so I attribute that to parallel evolution in the sense of like it's an intelligent ship, so the obvious thing to do, and what we did was look at stealth bombers, stealth spy planes like the U-2, the SR-71, obviously the B-2 and the F-117, and go from there, right? It's just where your mind goes naturally.
Sure.
Design doesn't happen in a void. That's why the original Enterprise is several rocket ships strapped to a flying saucer.
Indeed.
Well, yeah, we could go on.
That's a big
Yeah,
tangent.
let's not dive into that. I was making a joke. Let's not dive in.
Don't you dare!
We're already over.
This is Star Trek. We
hours.
can't make jokes about this. This is serious business. All right.
Super serious,
Indeed.
guys. Let's focus up here.
One thing I want to bring up. Last thing I want to bring up about the Texas class. It looked very Nova class reminiscent.
I agree.
Do you guys think that's intentional?
Yeah.
It's got to be, right? Like it's got the little divot in the front and the same silhouette. It's got to be around the same size too.
Yeah, I don't know if it was intentional. I mean, it might have been, but I don't know what the the sort of lore they had while they were cooking this up. Was it like, oh well, we had some leftover Nova class space frames that we appropriated to do this, and if it had been a little closer, I actually thought about putting this on the Nova class like skeleton STO so that people could swap parts between the Texas and Nova. We didn't end up doing that because the certain key pieces were in the wrong place. But it's something that I considered because it's a similar size and similar shapes.
But then it also draws like elements, I feel, from a lot of different like Star Trek, like Starfleet sources. That I feel like it's probably whoever designed it was like, hey, we want to build a small ship, and so they're just like, okay, let's look at a small ship that's it's good at fighting and it's largely unmanned, and they just pulled down a bunch of reference and then kind of went from there.
Yeah, and good at fighting is interesting.
It's hard to know.
Yeah.
If you're not there for like sometimes it's very obvious, like, oh yeah, we just wanted an evolution of the Enterprise D, or oh yeah, we needed a ship to translate to the big screen, and so the E is stretched.
Right.
Sometimes you can see the clear design lineage, and other times it's a little more muddled.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do know one thing though. What's the deal with the gold phaser arrays?
Are they gold?
Have we seen that before?
Yeah. The Prometheus, and I think actually the Nova too.
Well, there you go. Shut my mouth. I guess it is Nova
hold on.
inspired.
Prometheus might not be, but I know the Nova is.
Yeah, just gave this whole speech about how this isn't necessarily Nova inspired. And then there's another example of how it's Nova inspired.
One other thing I wanted to mention about this is the torpedo system on these ships. It's got the cluster torpedoes going on.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really see that a lot in Star Trek. I feel like in some next gen, it kind of looks clustery when the Enterprise D fires a torpedo and it spreads into a bunch of other torpedoes and does its thing.
Well, that was a big part of like what game was that where they had like the Enterprise armaments and they were like so divorced from what you saw on screen. Like they had like attack shuttles.
Starfleet Command, right? Was that
no, this was like old school, like TOS era.
Oh. Yeah, Starfleet Command.
Starfleet Command does missiles and shuttles and stuff.
Yeah, but they're like Wild Weasel shuttles and Suicide shuttles, and it was a movie era game, so it was all it was all
I was thinking more TOS era, but and you're just like, none of this relates to what we saw on screen, and like some of it you can just be like, okay, well they just didn't have budget, right? But other stuff you're like, you guys are just like, you liked this idea and you're shoehorning it in.
Well, it's based on Starfleet Command. The Interplay game is based on a board game called Starfleet Battles.
That's what I'm thinking of, Starfleet Battles.
Yeah, and Starfleet Battles was it's actually kind of interesting. So Starfleet Battles got the Star Trek license between the original series and the motion picture, when Paramount didn't give a shit about Star Trek,
but
and
they have a lifetime license.
The license is in perpetuity.
Was that
love it.
Amarillo that did
Yes,
that?
Amarillo's
I feel like
Design
we talked
Bureau.
about this before. It's
I
all
think we
coming
did.
back to me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the like they did a lot of really cool stuff, right? Like a lot of their designs were interesting. They had a lot of kit bashy stuff, but also they did a lot of just out there, you know. But to be fair, they didn't have a lot of screen stuff to work.
They can't use anything after TOS.
Yep.
So if they have to they had to fork. They literally call it the Starfleet Battles universe.
Yeah.
It's no longer Star Trek, right? Because they had to fork it because they couldn't take advantage of anything that wasn't in their license.
Yep. Right.
Anyways, yes, that so there is a precedent for the
these torpedoes. Yeah.
I
mean, I feel like they do show up in Next Gen a bit, but definitely something unique about this ship.
Not really ship necessarily related, and we may have talked about this when we talked about Rude Rutherford's shuttle.
Right.
It's the M5 computer, right? Screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's also in Rutherford's shuttle in their flashback. Which
makes sense. It's the same guy.
Yeah. That's what he was working on.
Yeah.
For good old Section 31.
Yeah. Yep. Let's move on to the next. This ship shows up in trusted sources and Stars at Night. It is the Free Spirit. It is Petra Aberdeen's ship that Mariner pops on for a while. We were just talking about asymmetrical designs recently. I mean, talk about asymmetrical. This ship has got a lot going on. There's like a cockpit in the front and a nacelle on the side.
I mean, it has one nacelle, which bothers me.
Right.
But overall, they don't do this enough in Star Trek. It's like, there's got to be people out there who just want to, explore, travel to even known locations, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to strange new worlds. They're going to Beta Z. They're going to Ferenginar, and there's got to be just these types of ships everywhere that are just cobbled together by people.
Right.
Yeah, I think this design does something really smart, which is, even though it looks kind of weird, it's clearly not a Starfleet ship, but they include one structure that is very obviously a Star Trek machine, the warp nacelle, right? Yeah. There's no confusing that this is a Star Trek ship because of that warp nacelle. And I wish there were, even with, ships like the La Sirena and other sort of, civilian ships that aren't in Starfleet. I get they're not in Starfleet, but you still want some piece of the design to tell you, oh, this is from Star Trek.
Yeah. And I think that's what this ship does. Like the design of the La Sirena. The problem is they had the perfect opportunity to incorporate the warp nacelles into the structure of the ship, and I think that's probably what those runners along the side are, the catamaran pieces. But they just didn't do a good enough job of communicating that this is a warp nacelle.
Yeah, they could have been much more direct about it, which I think would have helped tie it in with the universe.
Overall, I liked that design. But we're not talking about the ships of Picard. That's a whole other podcasting subject matter.
Is this so? What is the little? It looks like a jet engine that's kind of strapped to the back part of the ship.
Yeah.
What's going on there? There's so much of the ship I don't understand.
It looks more to me like a garbage can. A giant garbage can in space.
It could be. I mean, it could be an impulse engine, I guess.
I see it from the back, though. Is it impulsing, or is it just an exhaust on there?
Yeah, I don't know. I need to bring up a back aft view of that ship.
Well,
I don't know.
In space, impulse engines aren't necessarily always on.
No, they're always on in Star Trek. I don't know if you've noticed.
That's next gen afterwards that are always on.
Stationary orbit, Mr. Data. Okay, you're stationary. Why are your engines on?
I'm actually going to go back to Picard season 3 for a second, because this is a civilian ship, the Free Spirit. But compare that to the Helios from Picard season 3. That ship also theoretically a civilian ship, but has a much more Starfleet-y look to it. But compared to this ship, the Free Spirit, I mean, whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Both are supposed to be civvy ships, though.
Well, my canon for the Helios was that it was actually built by the Federation, in the same way they would build ships for
you got like surplus ships.
Starfleet.
Yeah.
But this was never like, it was either built and then decommissioned, and when ships are decommissioned, as long as they're of a certain class, they allow people to just recommission them themselves. Or it was built specifically for civilian use. Because it was a medical ship, right? The Helios was?
I mean, it's basically a little ship with that transported supplies, it felt like. Medical supplies. But
wrong.
Just interesting to see that together. I love seeing like you guys said, it's clearly a Star Trek ship, but mainly because of the nacelle. But I love seeing the.
I do think one other thing that, and I really wish I had taken the time to, that whole extra, week we had preparing for this. I feel like all of the design elements of this ship are like cobbled together from other ships we've seen in Star Trek. I'm not 100% sure. Like the wing section, that's not really a wing section. I am 90% certain that is from actually another ship that we saw in this series. The vessel from Grounded that the Akira is firing on. I think... Nope, I'm wrong. It's not close enough. Same basic shape, though.
You think? I mean, this has got to be a unique 3D model design.
No, but I think they're trying to evoke that feeling that this was cobbled together.
Sure.
From like a bunch of different pieces. And I'm willing to bet in doing that, they looked at, ships from across the franchise.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, now that you say it, it does look more cobbled together.
Really like this ship. That's my takeaway.
Well, let's move on to the last. I can't believe it, guys. After so many hours of doing these 2 episodes, we're finally there. And of course, we're going to talk about all the California-class ships. Yes, they show up. Actually, aside from the final episode, Stars at Night, we do get to see another California-class ship in Mining the Mines on the Carlsbad. I love this, not only because it has USS San Jose in there that you get a shitty look at, but you know what? It still exists, so suck it. The interesting thing about this is all of the different paint jobs on the California-class ships. At first, just got the stripe on there, but I mean, all this is canonized. This reminds me a lot, Thomas, of the designs you can put on your ships in STO.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know. But then again, we've never seen canonical like these. Well, to my knowledge, that I can recall, any canonical type of paint jobs like this on ships before. So, did you guys like it?
You know what it reminded me of, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but it reminded me of the clone troopers in.
Oh yeah, no, I totally get that.
Because they needed, they needed to have some personality and differentiation between them, so they added a lot of different like paint jobs, and like, if you're such and such rank, you're using these shoulders, and then it eventually just became like the clone's own desire for self-expression, and then they, and other clones. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about having a clone army is I feel like everybody in that army is a lot more empathetic to each other, because they're literally all brothers. So I'm sure that they kind of let each other get away with things that you wouldn't necessarily get away with in a regular army. But anyway, this isn't about Star Wars, so I think it was, we've got 20 or 30 ships all of the same class. What's an easy way to set them all apart?
Well, they even have like slightly different hull tones beyond just, the coloration.
Yeah.
Like some are lighter and some are darker. Some it's like full bore paint. Others it's just like a stripe here or there. Even different elements of the ship have different tones, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I like it. It's one of those things where on the one hand, Star Trek, so, super tech doesn't really matter, but then I also think back to the, orange tank on the space shuttle, where they're like, yeah, it used to be white, but we stopped painting it because it was so much extra weight just to have paint on there. And so now whenever I see a starship that's painted, I'm all like, man, that's like tons of weight there, guys. Yeah.
A lot of work. Yeah. Hey, maybe space doesn't really weather it that badly, so you stick those you got those little drones like from Discovery. You just send one out there and it paints it over the course of like a week or something.
You're producing so much additional thrust, the little bit of weight doesn't really matter.
Yeah, maybe.
So one of the interesting things, I mean, if you look at what the California class does, the best analogy in the modern Navy is an
Yeah.
auxiliary ship, like or a fleet tender. So these ships, they're resupply ships, they're repair ships. Some of them even have like actual like dock and repair facilities in the ship, and they can go right up next to like a submarine, for example, and do major repairs on the submarine at sea. And that's sort of, I think, what a good example of what the California class is in the Star Trek universe. And we kind of see that with the giant warp core it has. It's overpowered for what it needs, but it uses that power to power big transporter or replicator missions, or to provide settlements with power if they need it. And so I said all that to say that, like, you probably in a class like that, like the U.S. Navy had submarine tenders that were very specifically for repairing and resupplying submarines, and then there were like destroyer tenders or something, or like very specifically for this other type of ship. And so I could see this whole color scheme thing being like kind of related to that, where it's like, well, these California classes have this very super specific mission, and these guys are all about colony construction, and that's why they're yellow, right?
Designed to communicate a role.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Where are you going with this?
I'm about to say something incredibly stupid. So that's a problem I have with Star Trek.
I'm ready.
And ironically, I think the only show that's ever really... Actually, there's a couple of shows. Battlestar Galactica did it, and of all shows, Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda did it. The view screen, right? Being like the main source of looking at things in space and actually like seeing them is like ridiculous from like just a pure logistics and usable information standpoint. Like, you have a million sensors on these ships. You're looking at things that are, potentially billions of miles away. Like, why are you pointing a camera at it? Like, you would have like... And it's not even useful information to just look at something other than to say, oh yeah, that's pretty, man. It's all like, you're going to get all of this data from... Oh, Babylon 5 did it too. You're going to get all of your data from like screen readouts and... plots, and you would think that every bridge on board, a vessel in Star Trek would have some sort of like holo display that creates like a 3D image of the space. Like, that would be your main like tactical view. But I don't know. I'm probably wrong.
We saw that in Star Trek 2 when Saavik is taking her Kobayashi Maru test.
True,
there's a cool map of the neutral zone, and I agree with you. They should have done that a lot more.
Don't they show it in Star Trek 2 when they're circling the planet with Reliant on the other side?
Star Trek 2 did a lot of really innovative stuff with how they portrayed space and space travel.
Mm-hmm.
I just like the Genesis.
Oh my god, these graphics are amazing!
High tech. So futuristic.
I think that was one of the first uses of CG in a major motion picture. Was the Genesis demo.
I don't know.
I love it. Anyway, we're talking about California class ships here.
But I like it. It looks nice. I really think it looks good.
But back to the paint jobs, if there was a hero ship, like let's say the next Star Trek series, or let's say even the Cerritos, it gets banged up at the end of Stars at Night, and we come back in season 4, and you know what? They gave the Cerritos a paint job. It's got the orange or the yellow paint job. It's more serious than it was before. Does that work as a hero ship, or is it only kind of work because they are, plot wise like a support ship?
I think it's only for background ships. I think you want your hero ship to have that kind of clean Starfleet, battleship gray look.
I think it could work, but you would really need to establish a series where the spaceships are colorful and vibrant, and that's not Star Trek.
Yeah.
I mean,
Star Trek is not that, except for the California class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I think you can make the argument that the reason the California classes are like that is because more than a lot of other types of Starfleet ships, they're operating in busy, high traffic areas with a lot of civilians. Right? Mm. They're always going to existing ports. They're working on infrastructure projects. They're building space stations, demolishing moons. Like if you see, it's like a bulldozer, right? That's sort of like how I think about it in my mind, is like these ships are, bulldozers and construction equipment. They're painted bright yellow because you want, when people see them, you want people to know, hey, be careful, right?
Right.
And so that's sort of kind of how I see some of these.
They're like saying, hey, it's a Kali-class. It's not our best and brightest. Forgive us.
Hey, look, it's not Starbase 80 shuttlepods, all right? It could be a lot worse. Yeah. Well, I think we're out of ships to talk about. It happened eventually.
There's never a shortage of ships to talk about. I mean, you just ran out of ships for this season.
Yeah, that's true. But any closing thoughts for the ships of this season? I mean, you talked a little bit about how, the Eagle Boss models have improved the quality. Numerically, it feels like there's a lot more than last season when we last talked.
Yeah, it's quality and quantity, right? Because if they can use those models and they have access to a lot of them, that means that that really just opens up the door on what they can do. They don't have to worry about fitting it into the budget as much.
Just like a huge variety of ships. Like,
it's true. We got Starfleet ships. We got the cobbled together looking ships.
You got
Drookmani.
Shiny ships. You got ships covered in dirt. You got, legacy callbacks to previous Trek series. You got brand new, never before seen things. Yeah, they did a little bit of everything. It's really, that's what it comes down to.
We talk about we've talked about the quality of the show.
Yeah,
keeps,
I'm
really
looking forward to seeing what they do with the next season. I love me some spaceships and I love me some space scenes. So
yeah, I need to figure out. I'm really sad about Eagle Moss going under because I can't get a legit Kali-class to put on my desk now. I have to figure out some other solution. Get something 3D printed or
surprising.
Something.
Yeah, that's a shame. Well, I know Master Replicas took over their inventory.
Yes, I've been keeping abreast of that, but it's hard to find the good stuff.
Right.
I gotta believe there's a market for that, and somebody will eventually jump into it.
Yeah, certainly the Eagle Moss issue was not about Star Trek. It was pandemic related, and
yeah, sure. But in any event, I think we've come to a close. Thanks a lot, Thomas, for joining us. Where can people get a hold of you to argue inane details about various starships?
Is this where, you are my single days where I asked a girl for a number at a bar and
I think so. Yeah, it's just like that.
And then I call it and it's pets.com or something. Anyway,
I hope that didn't happen to you. That's essentially sad.
It actually not pets.com, but actually I did get a fake number one time. But you know what?
Oh no.
I don't I mean, no one should feel obligated to give the stranger their number at a bar.
That's true. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I have no ill will towards that woman.
Like, I've never been given a fake number, but I have had a girl just straight up say no when I asked her to get her number. And I was like, fine. I just moved on.
If every man did what you did, we wouldn't need fake numbers.
That's right. I sometimes forget that I'm a cut above the average man.
Of course.
Unfortunately, the bar is very low.
Well, I think at this point, the bar is closed.
I see what you did there.
Kind of.
Anyway, Thomas, where can people get a hold of you if they want to hear more about
Twitter is a great place to chat with me. As long as it still exists, I will be there at Thomas the Cat.
All right. Well, Aaron, I think it's time for you to get us out of here.
You can do the same. You can follow us on Twitter at Lower Dorks. We'll be back in the future for more coverage. I believe we've got something special coming in Strange New Worlds. But
I'm excited.
If you don't want to come back, if you don't want to follow us on Twitter, if you just want to ship, Stavros is waiting for you.
Oh. That sounds fun.
Oh, I mean, maybe for them. I'm not sure. Aren't you married? I feel like your wife is going to be angry if you start shipping.
That kind of ship. I see what you did there. Yeah. Okay.
Double entendre!